All right, I guess we're ready to start now. So we've got Rebecca all set up, and we're ready to go. So let's just take a little bit of color here. And then it's almost just like a quick sketch. So from looking at my hands, I was kind of looking through my hands at the composition. I was figuring about where the top of this will go, the head, and then I want to just make sure that I get all of this back here in, because I really like these colors that are happening on the hair. So if I start your tendency will be to start putting the eyes or your head right in the center of the canvas. So when I was in school, that would happen. You would just, without thinking about your composition, you'll put your eyes or whatever right smack dab in the center. And in this one, if I get the eye in the center, the back of the head is going to actually go off the canvas. So I'm making sure to give myself enough room here. And I think I'm going to make it around life size. So I'm going to just take a little measurement from my chin to my forehead, and that'll just kind of give me a rough idea of what how high that should be, from there to about there. And that's just a good way to estimate that, if that's what you're going for, is life size. And then kind of finding the middle distances. And I'm not going to really go too detailed on this, just because once I start blocking in the colors, the large shapes, I'm going to lose most of this. So sometimes if I'm not really sure where I'm going, or what I want to do with the picture yet, I'll go ahead and I'll just kind of draw this out even more detailed, even though I'm going to lose that when I start actually painting. It's not really a big deal, because it just gives me some time to think about where I'm going to go with the painting. This will just let me make sure that in the front of the ear, and I'll turn it this way. And you want to make sure your arm is completely straight, because if it's not, you can move back and forth and it will change the distance. So it comes right to the bottom of the lip. So on here, I go from there to there. Now on my drawing, I do that, just do it in reverse, and that'll give me that mark where the beginning of the ear is. Now, you can also check where the back of the ear is. You can check where the back of the head is. If in doubt, do more measuring than less. So from the chin here to just above the eyebrow, and then we'll do it here, and that'll give me where the back of the ear is. And I also want to be a little bit more careful on this one, which is part of the reason I drew this out. I don't want to just put the flesh tone on too loose like on that one, because I really kind of want to get a bit of a transparent quality to this background to get some interesting brushwork. And so I'm going to be a little bit more careful of pulling the flesh tone too far out in there where it would kind of muddy up those colors. All right, so let's just get down just a nice general wash for the background. And I'm not going to go as dark as I can. I'm not going to go my darkest dark. That's going to come later. That's going to come from my final accents. I'm just going to mix up a value that on my palette now, I compare it to my darkest dark on my palette, my lightest light. I'm just thinking in my mind now, okay, to get at that same relationship, okay, it's closer to this, but it's not as, it's definitely still in the shadow. It's in the shadow range of values. All right. You see how on the canvas, even now that I have a dark down here, you can kind of see how that's in that range that we're just talking about there. So I'm just thinking that, to me, that looked like it was about halfway between my lightest light and darkest dark. So that's what I'm mixing up, is something that's about halfway, maybe slightly half value towards the light. but it's pretty close to halfway between it. And so that's what I'm going to put down here. And it's also got quite a bit of warmth to it because of this, all this cool light over here. This cool blue light is making this shadow become relatively warmer. And then when we go over to this side here where we have the really bright red, it will actually look relatively cooler to that. That's actually a great lesson in this one. We could point out the relativity of colors, because in a lot of paintings you only have one light source. So you have, it will either be warm light and cool shadows, or it'll be cool light and warm shadows. They're always opposite to each other. So I'm going to mix up a flesh tone. Start out with this blue a bit. But the blue is the color of the light. It's not going to be totally blue. It's still going to be a blue flesh tone. That's the important thing to remember, because it's still got that local color of her skin. So I'm going to go maybe even bluer than I will at the very end, just to get that in here. Going from warm, and then putting a cool over it of the same value, and then back and forth. You'll go back to the warm, back to the cool. And I'm kind of just using the paint that I've got down there already, and we're kind of mixing into it, getting interesting edges. This is Clausen's oil prime, double oil primed canvas. This is like the, this particular one I believe is the fine portrait texture. I've also used the medium texture. It's just got a little bit more of a tooth texture to it. Painting is one thing after another. You can't do it all at once, so you really have to plan it out. You can't try and think, okay, I want this one spot to be perfect with just the one stroke. You have to think ahead and think, well, it's going to be just like we were talking about the warm and the cool. You're thinking about what it will look like with that color, and then the colors you're going to apply above that as well. This is the time to be nice and loose and play with your brushwork. You're not, it's not time to get into the details yet or to get noodly. A lot of these might get worked over as we get into the details, but some of them will still show through when we get to the final painting. See, and also notice on the palette, again, mix right next to these colors, because I wanted to go like a little bit of a purpley pink, just a tiniest bit darker than this value here. So I'm mixing it right next to my palette, so I don't have to keep testing it up here. This is just a tiniest bit darker than that, almost the same value. I've already got that on my palette, so it's very easy then to match that up here. That's the key to that warm over cool over warm thing, is you got to get those values just to be just the same. I'm just checking really carefully where this lip here comes to the bridge of the nose and the top there. I know exactly where to cut that into. Back a little bit more. See how nice that is, having some paint to work into? That effect of that kind of glow. If you were painting right up to the line, you'd never be able to get that. I'll cut back in over here. Start to chisel that out. Looks very sculptural. And I'll probably go back over that a little bit, just back and forth. It's getting closer. There we go. And so let's just squint down, look at that shape, and just try and recheck that. So this is all just a matter of, now that I've established those values, just really carefully going from one thing to the next and measuring it out. Just the same thing with the back here. I'm measuring it off of the nose. I'll kind of go to the nose here and go here, come back, and that'll give me that point there at the corner of the mouth. And these values are real important ones to check. Just like we said in the previous painting. This value, you don't want to get as dark. Same thing with that nostril. It was considerably lighter than my darkest dark, because when I squint down, it's such a small little shape in that, surrounded by all that light. It just can't get as dark as your deepest, darkest accent. If you make it that way, it'll just jump out, and it'll just, even though if somebody isn't an artist, they'll know, subconsciously it will look wrong. See, I'm getting a little bit of that orange influence on there, and then I'm going to, in a few spots, then I'll come back over it with some of the blue, kind of just getting them working together. But I see how I'm really, now I'm going to get a little bit of that yellow, and you'll see how I'll really mix them on the palette right next to each other so that I can get those values the same. There we go. Squint down just to check and see what value it is against my lightest lights. Let's try this out. Might need to go a little bit lighter, but I think that's pretty good. It's such a balancing act. These highlights, these little light spots, the tendency is to make them all the same, and you really have to compare them to each other. Find that spot, and then I'm also thinking about where does it come to the bridge of the nose. So you find those two spots there, and then that kind of gives you your extreme. So let's put that in. Back here it gets a little lighter, so I'm going to mix up a slightly lighter value of that. Put in a little bit of where the eyeball will go. And it's really a light, now I'm opening my eyes up and really studying the shape. And I squint down to see the value, open my eyes for the color. And the color of the eyes will change. You can't just ask the model, what color is your eyes? It'll change completely by what they're looking at, what's reflecting in them, what's in the room, what kind of light's on them. Measuring off of there, straight up to there. Even with this, I'm going a little bit bluer. I'm going to come over it with a little bit more of a grayish color, warmish gray, and pull that over it. So even in something like that, I'm doing the warm over cool and cool over warm effect. Now the white of the eye is basically going to be, usually it's going to be the value of whatever's around it. It's nice when you're excited to paint. I was definitely raring to go, getting eager to work on this. It was hard to hold back and not work on it while the cameras weren't rolling. Just as we got to the end of this painting yesterday, I was really starting to get into that art zone where you start feeling where things are going to go, and it just starts to go very fast. You've laid all the groundwork and you start to brush in here and there, and see, even with this hair, I'm working that same principle of kind of going a little, getting more of the warmer version of the color and then the cooler version of the color, and then pulling them back and forth on top of each other. And even these kinds of areas, I'm doing the same thing that we were talking about with the forehead, pulling them a little bit farther than they actually go exactly so that I can work into them when I put these other colors down here. All right. Even this I'll be dividing up into, even something that's as warm as that will have some cools in it. Let's test that out here. See where the bottom of the light pattern starts. Right about there. I'm just getting about my reddest red under here, and then I'm going to pull color over the top of this, so that just a little bit of that still shows through. More of my oranges and grays. You see how the effect of that, about putting the darker kind of red and then putting a little streak of the lighter on top of that, it gives that somewhat of a glow effect. That's what you're going for. I get a little bit of that on the cheek here, a little bit of light hitting there. Again, that you just squint now to your lightest light, the back of the neck there, compare that. And it was easy for me to mix in my palette because I still have some of that there. Let me check that. Just going to test it out here. Kind of drag that in there, try and keep it a simple brush stroke so that I'm trying to put the brush stroke down so I get a hard edge up there and then let it kind of wing off and soften as much as I can. That'll save me having to soften it a real lot with another brush later. So you try and, that way you can get it in just one or two brush strokes, but you can leave that brush stroke alone. Put it down real heavy, you're going to get a hard edge all around it, and then you'll have to adjust it. And if that's what happens and you have to do it, then you do it, because getting that edge right is more important than the nice brush work. Do some more work on this hair. Just start working these things one into the other, getting our edges going. And don't rush it. If you like, what I'll do on these, we have a model over. If I start getting to where I feel like, God, I'm not getting this area done enough, I don't try and speed up. And even if, say, I weren't to get the hand going enough, I'll just stop. I'll just say, okay, then it's just going to be the head. Or I'll take a photo and work on blocking the colors of something for the hand, and then finish the rest of it from the photo. That's probably the most important thing if you do run out of time, to just get a few notes of the colors, of the values of your light and dark. And because that's what you don't get from the photo, is that value range. So even when you're working with the palette knife, it's just same as the brush. You're just going large shapes, and we'll go into that and start refining it and get our smaller ones. And now that I've got enough of this, and I think that's right, I feel like I can put some of these little strands of hair across it. And if I find out that I don't have that right, I'll just repaint underneath it and do this again. But kind of want to hold off on these until you feel at least that you're pretty far in that. Otherwise, you're just going to have to try and be painting around those little strokes. And these really thin little strands, you have to be careful not to get them too light. I'm going to squint down at them and see how they disappear. Because they're thin little strokes, little strands. It's pretty bright because it's catching the light, but not as light as over here. You can see when I hold these next to each other. They look bright enough, even with that kind of darker red there. Kind of twisting the brush to give it more of a interesting kind of a shape to the brush stroke. Let me get a little bit, some of these darks under here and up here. Pull some of that color kind of into underneath here so I can get that softer edge and a little bit darker. Take some of that color and I'll just get a little bit of the greenish flesh tone in there. Just kind of pull it right in there so that I get a nice soft edge, because when I squint, that edge really disappears. Tendency will be to paint that really, really defined, because you'll open your eyes and really study the shape. All that needs to really just lose itself. Yeah, this is really fun. For me, not for Rebecca or anybody else. But. So yeah, this is just a good demo for painting from life. It's so hopefully we're doing this video, and then we're going to doing a video on painting from photos. You kind of see the advantages of both and the drawbacks. They're both painting from life, though. You can get away with only painting from life for your whole career. You can't get away from paint. You can't get away with painting only from photos for your whole career, because when you're working from photos, you have to continually refresh your mind, not only to keep you loose and painting quickly and directly, but also just to let you know what you're not seeing in the photo. But if your subject is only from subjects like this that you can paint from life, there's no real, or if you want to do small landscapes, or there's not too much reason to paint from photos. This is so much easier. Doing this, like to try and do this painting from a photo, it just wouldn't get as good of results, because colors wouldn't be there, and it just would be more of a struggle with the values. Photos are best for things that you just can't get to hold still, or you can't get into your studio. And those are always going to be my favorite paintings of my own, probably paintings from photos, because those are my favorite subjects. People out in scenes in China and doing natural things and just getting certain expressions and all that. You're not going to paint somebody. Just did a painting from Nepal, this old lady with a huge smile on her face, huge gap tooth smile on her face. And, even if you were to be able to convince her to pose for you for several days with that, there's no way you could hold that expression. I mean, you just wouldn't get it. And this one, those background is going to have a lot of my darkest darks. So now as I start getting towards the end, I don't put those in the beginning, kind of save those as accents. As I start getting to this point, I can start putting a few of them in. Videos and photos are all great, but they'll never, at least not yet, have replaced seeing the actual painting in person. There's just no way you can catch all the really true subtleties and true colors. Sometimes I will have seen a painting like of Sargent's or Fession's several times, and I have it in several different books, and I'm almost curious when I go to see it, which one is it going to look like? Because the different books, they look so different in each particular one, and then you see it in person and you realize, boy, it doesn't really look like any of them. I mean, you get a sense of it, but the actual depth and subtlety of the color just can never actually come out completely perfect. Texture, all that sort of stuff. But that said, boy, aren't we lucky as artists to be born now. Think of when I read back in some of the historical painters, how, like with Sargent, when he went to Spain and first saw Velázquez's work, what a revelation that was to him. You imagine, there were no books, there were no art books, no internet, no television. The only way you could see those paintings of the masters was to travel. Back then, travel was even harder. Travel to those actual places to learn from it, see the advances. And that was a lot of times when you hear about artists copying paintings, like Sargent doing copies of Velázquez. It was more just to copy the painting so they would actually have it in his studio to remind him of those lessons. Now, if they had art books in color like we have now, that might not have been as big of an issue for them. So over on this side, I'm going to get some of that warm, a little bit of a warm in between this and this. Really intense color here. I'll give us a bit of a warm glow on that. Same thing back here. So it's like a sky hole when you're painting a tree. Because it's, surrounded by the light, or gets nearer to this area, it actually takes on the color of this light. Even though that might be the background showing through, when I look at it, I squint down, it appears lighter, and you give it that bit more of a color, and it gives you that sense of the color that is happening there. Those you want to be careful of. If you can overdo that too, and where it'll get looking too gaudy. So I'll usually put them in, and then some areas I might need to take out, or take some of this background and pull it back over it here and there, so it just shows through a bit. Okay. I cut this down a little bit, work my edges. That's when you actually get to make your funnest brush strokes, these very last ones. And they have to be the very last ones because you want them to show through on top of everything else, because if you weren't the last, you'd have to go over them and over them with other things. Tie some of that together. Oh, I think I'm going to wash some of this cloth in and really start thinking about, question whether I want to put the hand in or not. I really like the washing this down here, so let's see. All right, let's start putting in some of this color. Now back here, of course, the collar is getting this warm light and this is getting cool. So even though it's black shirt, you have to remind yourself and squint and look at the darkest darks, because with that shirt getting all that white on it, all that light on it, it's not anywhere near as dark as your darkest dark. Also going to find a few places to use this color around here, say in the hair or something, just so that doesn't get too isolated, just adds to the unity that you have in the painting. So mixing up almost the same value here, it's just going to go cooler for the other side of the shirt. So see how they're the same value, just one's cooler, one's warmer. Loose and undefined, but see how that kind of now lets your eye kind of really pulls it up into there in the painting. So you do want to be careful with that, what's happening on the edges. Even if those edges are going to be just left loose and abstract, they're still going to have an effect on the eye of the viewer. Almost always.
Taking a break.
So
I can't wait. I mean, this video is going on forever.
Yeah, well, gosh, they filmed the whole thing. They never edited them, so.
It was over 2 days.
Well, this painting was probably just one setting, wasn't it?
No,
or was
it was
2?
2 days.
Oh my goodness.
So it was probably about 5 or 6 hours.
Yeah, that other one was like 6 hours in my studio.
Well, I guess that's about it.
Sue got me to dress up for it too.
Yes, we're done.
You know, get your beard.
Yeah. Oh, great.
Thank you, Rebecca. Great job. Thanks for joining me for another demo. And I guess we're done, and I hope you learned something. But if you learned anything, I hope it's just to slow down on these paintings. Take your time.
Well, there you go. I did slow down. Huh?
Yeah.